This conference will now be recorded.
In the last session, what we have discussed tabbed block, no? We have discussed the tabbed block. Okay. Now let us see how to design what drop down list boxes. How to design drop down list box in what this particular dialog programming. Okay, once again, just go through the screen. Just a minute. Okay. So what is my requirement is I want a dialog screen which should contain a drop down list box. Okay. So when do we go for drop down list box? I think already somewhere I covered F4 help, na? Right? So if you want to populate F4 values, what is the function model we use? F4 if underscore int underscore table underscore value underscore request. Okay, that is the function model we have to use for populating the F4 values. And drop down. Okay, so when do we go for F4 and when do we go for drop down means when we have hundreds of values, we'll go for F4. When we have some fixed set of values like 4, 5 values, 5, 6 values, if you want to show them in the form of drop down, I can go for this particular drop down list box. Okay, so what is my requirement here? My dialog screen should contain a drop down list box, one text field here. If I click on the drop down list box, it should show three values: courses, institutes, and locations. Okay, and every value in the drop down will be associated with a key. Am I clear? Every value in the drop down will be associated with a key. So how many values are I'm going to show? Three values. Okay, so for these three values, I'll associate what three keys: K1, K2, and what K3. And I require what three blocks. I require three blocks. In the first block, I have to show checkboxes. In the second block, I have to show radio buttons. In the third block, I have to show some text fields. Okay, and these three blocks should be invisible by default. Means when the screen is displayed, these three blocks should be invisible. In the runtime, if I select courses, this courses block should be made visible. If I choose institutes block should be made visible. Understood? So that is a validation here. By default, all these three blocks should be invisible. Depending on the value I select in the dropdown, the appropriate block should be made visible. And in the first block, we have checkbox. In the second block, we have radio buttons. On selecting this checkbox or radio button, I have to display some appropriate message. Understood? So already we know how to work with checkboxes. Even said, whenever we select a box, or whenever we select a radio button on the selection screen, there would be some events triggered. Events gets triggered. So let us first focus on designing this particular screen. Yeah, any questions related to the requirement, please ask. Done. So let's design this. As usual, I'll go to Object Navigator, SE80. Okay, so I'll go to SC80. What is the last program? Yeah, you can see here, this is also a drop down. If I click on the drop down, I'll getting the list of values. Understood? F4 is different, drop down is different. Don't get confused. We'll go for F4 when you have hundreds of values, thousands of values. Drop down means only some fixed set of values which the user should be able to see. Understood? So like a 10, 12 values they are showing here. So I'll just from the drop down I'll choose program. What is the program name? Z830 mod 6. Done. Program does not exist. Create the object. Let us create this program with what? Top include program. Let me give the name of the top include program as Z830 mod 6 top. Continue. Okay. Type of you can see this is also a drop down, no? Right, where I am able to see some list of values. So I'll choose module pool here. Okay. A title. You can give any title, whatever you want. Let us save it in the local object. Yes, it is saved in the local object. Fine. So what is the agenda now? I require one screen now. So I'll right click on the program. I will launch the screen painter tool. Right click on the program, create the screen. Okay, let me give the screen number as 100. Continue. Provide some description. I'll give the description as screen 100. Done. Okay, I'll go to the layout. Okay, this is a screen type is normal screen only. I'll go to the layout and design the screen. It is opening the layout here. So earlier, what are the screen elements we have discussed? Text field, IO field, and I believe we have discussed what push button. And yesterday we have discussed what subscreen area. We have discussed what tab strip control. I don't have any control like a drop down. I don't have any direct control like drop down. Input field only, IO field only should be converted to what drop down. So what I'll do here, I'll take the IO field. I'll draw it here. Okay. So we know an IO field means it can hold only one value. Na? So if I set the properties for this IO field, let me give the name as IO1. Format is by default character. So I'm setting this as what I let me save it and go back and let me open once again. Yeah. So this is the name of the input field is what IO1. This IO1 only should be converted to drop down. So what I have to do in the properties of this input output field, you can see there is a property called as drop down. In the property window, in the drop down, you can see we have two possible values. What are they? Drop down. What are the values? List box and list box with the key. As I told you, every value in the list box should be associated with a key. I need not show the keys to the user. Generally, we don't show the keys to the user. Keys are for programming purpose. We need not show the keys to the user. So I'll choose a drop down property value as what list box. So you can see at the moment I set the drop down property, I am getting a drop down icon here. Na? So the IO field only should be converted to what? A drop down list box. So let me save it. I'll take one text field here, like a select a value. I'll give the name as something T1. I'll give the text as select a value. So as usual, I require one button for exit. Na? Let me take one button also for exit so that because back button will not be available. I need to set the PF status. So instead of setting the PF status, I'm giving the name. I'll give the text as what? Exit. Function code, let us give it as FC1. Done. Let me save it. Check for the syntax error. No. So what is the function code I give? FC1. Let us write the logic for the exit button. Let me say what is the event triggered PA. Na? So in the screen flow logic, as part of that PAI event module, I'll double click on this PAI event module. Does not exist. Let us create the object in the top include program. Case IUCOM when what? When FC1 I'll say leave program, leave program, and end for case is what? End case. Save it, check for the syntax, activate this. Go back and activate the flow logic also. Flow logic is also activated. Let me create the transaction code for execution. Right click on the program, create what? Transaction. Let me give the T code name as something ZM6. Provide the description. T code for module pull so and so. What is the radio button? Program and screen for dialog transaction. As usual, provide the program name Z830 mod 6. What is the screen number? 100. I'll choose 100. Let me save it. Okay, activate the whole program. Yes, it's activated. Let me execute. Right click on the program, execute direct process. Yeah, this is my dialog screen, which doesn't have any drop down values at this. It is blank. Nothing is there. When I click on the exit button, yes, working fine. And already I covered how do we enable this back button on my screen. The back button is disabled. How do I enable this? Anyone? How do I enable this back button? Anyone?
POV
Sorry, Rohit.
process output here.
PBO.
Process PBO. We have to handle
Uh,
what? PBO event.
yes,
What we have to do in that PBO event?
for
What
We
we
have
have
to
to
go
the
to
we
independent and we have to give function progress.
Status.
Good. We have to define a GUI status. As part of that GUI status, we need to assign the function code for the back button, then handle what? PA event and write the logic to exit the program. Good. Okay. So we already discussed that. So again, I'm not focusing on that. So my next requirement is I want some values to be associated with this drop down. Understood? If you want to associate F4 values, we already know we have to prepare an internal table with the list of values and pass that internal table as a value to the function model, as a parameter to the function model. F4 if underscore int underscore table underscore value underscore request, which we have discussed last week. So now I need to associate values with the drop down. So for this, we have to use a function model. If I go to function builder, SC37, we have one predefined function model called as VRM underscore set underscore values. This is the function model which we can use to associate list of values for the selection screen drop down list box as well as for the dialog screen drop down list box. So anyhow, we are in what? Dialog screen now, that is module pull screen. This is the function model you have to use. As usual, before calling any function model, what you have to do? Check the signature of the function model, analyze what are the mandatory parameters, what are the optional parameters. So if I go to import section, there are two mandatory parameters. Optional checkbox is not selected. So there are two mandatory parameters. One is ID, another is what? Values. One is ID, another is what? Values. What is the first parameter here? ID is of what type? VRM underscore ID. So by looking at this, I don't know whether it is integer, character, date, time, I don't know. What is the description here? Name of what? Value set. Name of value set. So if I double click on this, yes, VRM underscore ID is of type VRM underscore value hyphen text. It is available in the type group VRM. I believe already we know about type group. What is the type group? Anyone quickly? What is the type group? I think I covered somewhere. What is the type group? Anyone? I think I covered that in dictionary objects. What is a type group? Did I cover or not? Type group.
Where all type structures are defined.
Good. Where it is a collection of global types and global constants. inside the type group, we can have only types declarations and constant declaration. Okay, we have some naming convention for the type group components. Can anyone tell me what is the naming convention for the type group components? Naming convention for the type group components. Did I cover type group in the dictionary objects? Can anyone confirm me? I think
Yes,
I
sir.
covered. Yeah. The point is, all the components of the type group must start with name of the type group followed by underscore. Right? So what is the name of the type group here? VRM. That's why you can see all the components are starting with what? Type group name followed by underscore. Here also type group name followed by underscore. So any component, any declaration that you observe in type group will follow the naming convention. It must start with type group name followed by underscore. So why we are discussing all these things? If I double click on this VRM underscore ID, it has taken the control to this type group. This VRM underscore ID is what type? VRM underscore value hyphen text. If I double click on this VRM underscore value hyphen text, VRM underscore value is a types structure. In that they are referring to a field what? Text of 80 type C. So it is a character field. So what is the understanding? I must pass a character field. What is that here? Name of what? Value set. Value set means the name of the list box which is going to hold the set of those values. In our case, what is the name of our list box? IO1 only, na? Understood? If I double click on this, what is the name I gave for this particular what? Drop down list box? IO1. If I double click, what is the in the property window? What is the name? IO1. So I have to pass that particular IO1 what in single quotes. We have to pass that IO1 in what? Single quote. So that it will identify. Then what is the other mandatory parameter? Values. It is a what type? VR underscore values. By looking at this, again I cannot say whether it is integer, character, work area, internal table. I don't know. So what I need to do? I need to double click and check whether it is referring to the individual field or whether it is referring to the structure or whether it is referring to the internal table. So let me double click and check. Yes, you can see VRM underscore values is of type VRM underscore value occurs 0. Occurs 0. So now onwards, remember, wherever we see occurs keyword, you have to understand that as an internal table. Wherever occurs keyword is there, you have to understand that as an internal table. Am I clear? So I need to prepare an internal table. What is the structure of this internal table? It is a what type? VRM underscore value. VRM underscore value is a structure which has got two fields, key and what? Text. As I told you, every value in the drop down will have a key. So key is also character of 40, text is what? Character of 80. So what is the analysis? The second parameter is the internal table. So far we know that whatever is there in the tables, we assume that as what? Internal table. But now this also I'm telling this as the internal table because this declaration is referring to what? An internal table. How can you say this is the internal table? If you see occurs, you have to understand that is the internal table. So I need to prepare an internal table of this structure which has got two fields, key and text. Based on that, we have to prepare the internal table and pass that internal table as a value to this particular parameter. Export I need not check because always the export parameters are optional. Yes, it is optional. Changing, nothing is there. Tables, nothing is there. Exceptions, it might raise as exception. Our job is to handle the exception. So what is the understanding? Before calling this function module, I need to keep this internal table ready, na? Then only I can pass it. So let me prepare an internal table of what type? VRM underscore values. So where when you want that values by default, na? So what are the default logic you want to execute? That will execute where? In the flow logic. Sorry, in the PBO event. because that is the first event which gets triggered. So I'll uncomment this PBO event module. Understood why I'm writing the logic in PBO? Because the moment the screen is displayed, the values should be available in that so that the user can do the selection. So since I want some default activity, the default activities you'll always implement in what PBO. And we know that PBO event is triggered twice, first time as well as every time after what PA. So what are the logic I'm writing now? I have to ensure that it has to be executed only once. How do I ensure? I'll take an indicator kind of thing. So I'll go to top include program. I'll declare one indicator kind of thing, data v underscore flag type what I. By default it is 0 na. By default it is 0. So now in the PBO event module, I'll double click on the module name. Module does not exist. Create the object. Yes. I'll choose what? Top include program. Continue. Done. So if you want to enable the back button, if you want to define your own title, you can do all these things. So what I'll do, if v underscore flag equal to 0, first time it will be 0 only. Na? Integers by default will contain 0. I'll change this value to 1. So that next time this is not satisfied. Means after PA, when it triggers PBO, the if condition should not be satisfied. So here only I'll just call one subroutine perform prepare what values, right? I'll double click on this. I'll define this subroutine inside the module. I can call the subroutine. Where you want to define this subroutine, better we choose what top include program. So what I have to do in this internal table, in this subroutine, I need to prepare an internal table. Na? What is the internal table type should be? It should be of type what? Of type what? VRM underscore value. VRM underscore value. So let me declare the internal table. So somewhere here, I'll declare the internal table. I'll say data t underscore values type table of what is the structure we have seen VRM underscore value. And to prepare the internal table, I require a work area. Na? So I'll declare a work area type what? VRM underscore value. So I declared an internal table and I declared what? Work area. Okay, right. Let me save it. Check for the syntax. So I declared an internal table and work area. Okay, and these are the component available in the type group. Na? So as I told you earlier in the dictionary objects, if you are using the components of the type group, in the older versions, we need to declare the type group by using what keyword? Type pulse VRM. Okay, now it is not required from 6.0. Before 6.0, if you are using the components of any type group, that type group should be declared by using what? Type pulse keyword, not required from what? 6.0. Right, so I declared an internal table and work area. So in the PBO event here only, in this subroutine, I'll prepare clear w underscore values. What are the two fields you have seen there? Key and text. If we double click once again and cross check, what are the two fields? Key and what? Text. Okay. So what are the values you want to show? Courses, institutes, locations. Keys, I'll give it as K1, K2, K3. You can give any keys, whatever you want. So I'll say, where is it? W underscore values hyphen key equal to what? K1. W underscore values hyphen text equal to, I'll say something courses. How do you prepare the internal table? Append W underscore values to T underscore values. Done. So my internal table is prepared. Sorry, I have to prepare some more entries. Right, I'll prepare some three values K1, K2. This I'll say something institutes. This I'll give it as something locations. Right. So I prepared an internal table which has got three values. What are the keys of these values? K1, K2, and what? K3. So the first event triggered is PBO. In the PBO event, if the flag value is 0, yes, first time 0. The moment it enters, I'm changing the flag value to other than 0. I can set it as 1, -1, 3, 4, whatever you want, you can set. I'm calling the subroutine where I'm preparing the internal table, which is holding the list of values. So once the internal table is ready, I need to what? Populate that. Na? I need to populate these values to my drop down list box. So let us call the function model. So what I'll do here, somewhere here only I'll say if what is the internal table? T underscore values is not blank. If it is not initial, what I have to populate, now let us call the function model. Since it is a function is always global, I'll say what vrm underscore set underscore what values id. Okay, import becomes export now id equal to what is the name of the list box in our case io1. What is the internal table I prepared? T underscore values. Okay, better we handle the exceptions. Okay, if this exception is set the size of RC value to 1, otherwise 2, give the period there and you handle the exception appropriately. If size of RC equal to 0, id underscore what? Illegal underscore name exception raised. Name exception raised. Type is what? I. Else if, or else you can go for case and case. Else if what? Size of RC is equal to 2. Unknown exception. So I'll just give a message. Unknown exception. That's it. What about this? So yeah, save it. Check for the syntax. Activate this. I'll use a pretty printer for proper alignment. Yes, properly aligned. Understood. On the application toolbar, we have the button pretty printer. So if I click on this, it will properly align. So what is the flow of execution here? Whenever we start the program, whenever we start the execution, the first event triggered is PBO. As part of this PBO event module, if flag indicator is 0, yes, first time it is 0. Okay, next time onwards it will not be executed. Okay, I'm calling one subroutine. As part of this subroutine, we have prepared the necessary data in the internal table. As part of every value, we have to give the keys also. I gave it as K1, K2, K3. If the internal is not blank, we are calling the function model. That's it. Activated. Let us execute this. I'm executing. Right. So I'll just click on this. I'm able to see the values. Understood. Courses, institutes, and what locations. Am I clear? So I got only 3 values. If I press enter also, what is that? 3 values. Now suppose if you don't write this logic, suppose I'll not set flag conditions, I'll not set. I'll remove these flags. Let's see what is the issue. If I remove the flags, if I remove the flag, what happens? Every time that PBO event logic gets executed, na? First time as well as every time after what? PA. So see this. When I activate and execute, right? So first time that is fine. Now I'll press enter on this drop down or somewhere on the screen. I'll press enter. The moment you press enter, what is the event triggered? PAI. After PA, again it triggers PBO. Again the same logic gets executed. So here I'm pressing enter. Now if I choose, what is happening here? It is keeping on appending. Am I clear? So if you press enter, it will become 9. So like this, the data would be duplicated. That is the reason. Ensure that PBO event is triggered only once in the lifetime of this particular requirement. Yeah, before I continue, any questions up to this point? No questions? Okay. So now onwards, remember, whenever you want F4, use that function model F4 if in table L request. Whenever you want to drop down, use this function model VRM underscore set underscore values. What is the next thing? I require some checkboxes, radio buttons. I want some blocks. So what I'll do on the layout, I'll take 3 checkboxes. In case of selection screen, we use some statement like parameter C1 as checkbox like that. So I have to draw it manually here. I'll just check the checkbox. I'll put it here. Another checkbox. I'll put it here. Right. I'll double click on this. I'll give the name of the checkbox. If I double click, I'll read the property window. I'll give the name of the checkbox as 1 second. Yeah. Name is what? CB1 something. Text. I'll give it as something ABAP. Okay, for checkbox also we can assign the function code. You can say it is asking FCT code, and let me assign the function code. I'll do one thing. For the drop down also, I will set some function code. As of now, I've not used it, but tomorrow I'll use it. So I'm setting the function code of drop down list box as FC2 because we are going to perform the action on that. So I'll go back to the first checkbox. I'll give the function code as FC3. FC3. Do this process for the rest of the checkboxes. Okay, I'll say Anna. Name I'll give it as something. CB2 I'll give the text as what? Anna. Function code I'll get as FC4. FC4. This is FC3. Double click on this. I'll give the name as something CB3. Text I'll give it as something UI5. Function code let us give it as FC5. So designing of checkboxes is done. I want a box kind of appearance. I'll take a box, I'll drop it here. Okay, for this, I'll give the name as BX1. Text, I'll give it as something courses. Done. So the designing of the checkboxes is done. Save it. Next, I'll take the radio buttons. I'll design some radio buttons. Click and draw. Right, so for these radio buttons, I'll give the names. Double click on this, I'll give the name as RB1. Text, I'll give it as something. Okay, observe here for this radio button, function code is disabled. Remember, I cannot assign function code for individual radio buttons. So that's why it is disabled. I'll double click on this. Let me give it as RB2. I'll give the text as something. Okay, so I gave some text here. Here also I cannot assign any function code. Let me give the name as something RB3. Okay, I'll give it as something. Right, I want a box kind of appearance. Let me take a box. I'll give the name as something BX2. Text I'll give it as something institutes. Done. I want one more box. with what? Some text fields. This already I gave it as T1. Na? So let me give it as T2, T3, T4. So here I'll say something. 3 text fields I'll take. Let us give the name of this as T2. I'll give some text T3. I'll give some text. So for text field also I cannot assign any function code. It is only for display purpose. T TF T3 also T4. Okay, name I'll give it as something. Right. So let me take a box kind of appearance. What is this? Location. So my designing of the screen is completed. Save it. Okay, so what are the names of the checkboxes? CB1, CB2, CB3. Radio buttons is RB1, RB2, RB3. For checkboxes, I am able to give the function code. For radio buttons, individual radio buttons, I cannot give any function code. Let me check it, save it, check for the syntax, and then activate this. Okay, execute now. Yes, I got those 3 things. Understood. And you can see here, what is the restriction? One of the validation, the user should be able to select only one radio button, right? So in case of selection screen, we have the concept of radio button group, na? Parameters, name as radio button group. Okay, here what you have to do is you have to group them manually. So I'll go to the screen layout and write. So what you do is, since you want to group these radio buttons, since you want only one radio button to be selected, select the first radio button, hold the control key. Select the second radio button, hold the control key, select the third radio button. Select the required radio buttons in order to group. So selected 3, right? After selecting the 3 radio buttons by holding the control key, right click on this selection and say radio button group define. Right click on the selection and choose what? Radio button group define. Then it has been defined. Okay, now see, save it, check for the syntax error, done. It's activated. Let us test it. I click on the program, execute direct processing. Yes. Oh, what happened? It is inactive. I have not activated. Na? Just saving is not sufficient. You have to activate it. So I've activate the flow logic, execute direct processing. Good. You can see by default which radio button is selected. Only the first one. Okay. If I choose this, automatically it is deselected. Okay. So what is the requirement here? By default, which radio button is selected? First one. Na? I want the second one to be selected by default. By default. So where do you write the default activity in the PBO? Na? So in the PBO event model, and I want to execute the logic only once. So in the PBO event module, if a flag equal to 0, I have to make only the one radio button. I want the second radio button to be selected. So I'll declare a variable here with the same name, data RB2 or data RB2 type C. Data RB2 type C. I'll say, where is that? In the PBO event module, if flag equal to 0 here only, what is that? Set the second radio button to be what? Selected. Set the second radio button to be selected by default. Okay, so I'll say RB2 equal to X. Understood? Already we know a radio button will have either X or space. I'm setting it to X. This RB2 is the radio button name. Na? So already we know if you want to refer to the screen fields within the program, I should declare the field with the same name. Na? I declared. Save it. Check for the syntax. Activate this. Okay, test it now. Right click on the program. Execute direct processing. Yes, you can see it. Second one is selected by default. Now I'll select the third one. Yes, since they belong to only one group, it is allowing me to select only one radio button at any point of time. So this is how we will do the grouping of radio buttons on the dialog screen. So my designing part is what? Over. What are the further requirements? The moment the screen is displayed, only your drop-down list work should be available. All these three should be made invisible. Depending on the value I select in the block, the appropriate block should be made visible. Depending on the value I select in the drop-down list box, appropriate block should be made visible. Right? Any questions so far, please ask. Okay, so designing part is completed. Rest of the validations, like what? 3 blocks should be invisible by default. This logic I'll write in tomorrow's session. We can do it in two different ways. So we'll discuss both the techniques tomorrow. Today, focus is on what? Focus is on what? Uh, designing the
Design.
designing the drop down list box, how to associate the values in the drop down, and we understood how to design the checkboxes, radio button, how to group the radio button. So practice this part. Tomorrow we'll continue with this program. Yeah, any queries before I log off, please ask. So why we have to learn all these things is when you are working with the standard screens, standard transactions, we'll encounter all these elements: drop down list box, push button, check boxes, radio button. So we need to do some enhancements on that. So if you want to do the enhancements, first of all, we should know how to work with them. That's what we are learning. Enhancement part we'll discuss in cross application when we discuss about enhancement techniques. Along with that, we have to use module pool there also. Yeah, I'm done for today then. No questions. Practice this. We'll continue tomorrow. Okay. Chalo.